Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Lisa Mclean on the podcast. She's coming to us all the way from the Great White North, that is Canada. I mean, she's actually, just like she said, like 45 minutes away from the Minnesota border. So it's nice to have someone, at least in the vicinity, who knows about the winter weather woes that I describe quite often on this podcast, because we have a lot of guests from like Florida and California where they're like, yeah, it's 60 degrees outside. I got to wear something, warm. And it's like, yeah, screw you, basically. But most importantly, I mean, yeah, she's a bodybuilder and she's a couple of days out from her pro debut, and more than happy to talk to her about her journey. And Lisa, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I asked this question to everyone. First off, what is the weather like today in your neck of the woods?
It's actually not too bad. I took my dog for a walk the first thing this morning at about 7 a.m., but I still had to wear about 3 layers. So I got, a base layer, I got a sweater, I got my parka, I got my toque, I got my hood up and my boots on. So the wind was still pretty chilly this morning. So
Yeah, well, I actually just came back yesterday from Nebraska because I was with my grandparents for Thanksgiving there, and we did not leave the heating on when we left. So when we got back, the house was 50 degrees when we walked in. So literally, it took us like all of last night because we got back at like 4 o'clock. It took us till about 10 o'clock before the house was like back up to like 65 or ish, whatever it was. But yeah, it was very cold, and we learned that the hard way. But before we get into bodybuilding, I'm one of the biggest dog lovers out there. What kind of dog do you have?
I have a Doberman. Yeah, he's beautiful.
Yeah.
Pax, come here. Come here, buddy. Come here. Come. See if he'll come and make me pet. Come here, buddy. Pax, come. Come here. What's this? Come here. Come here.
Oh wow, yeah, that is a big old dog. Yeah.
Oh, buddy, there he is.
Oh, I love how those ears just plop up.
Yep. So he is a red and tan dog.
Oh,
So
okay, yep. So
yeah,
your dog would literally step on my dog and kill it. We have a little Bashan Frise Cavachon, so it's a mix between that and a Cavalier King Charles. But she thinks that she's the toughest thing on the planet. So the moment your dog would walk up, though, she'd roll over because she knows that the fight's over. But her bark is the one thing that's like worse before any of her bites. So
we've been attacked by a couple little dogs. I think they're pretty tough. So
oh yeah,
he's pretty great with all dogs. So
yep, absolutely. I mean, having a dog, that's a good form of cardio at least. So maybe you might not be having to use the treadmill, as much as you normally would have
yeah,
to.
you know what? I use it as just like the extra step. Like extra steps throughout the day. So where I might hit 12,000, 15,000 for cardio. It's an extra bit in the morning, and sometimes I take them again at night. So it does add up for the additional steps, which is nice.
Yep. And I mean, yeah, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you just give us your backstory and what really inspired and motivated you, start working out, and how that led to you eventually becoming where you're at right now?
Yeah, so I think when I was 17, got a subscription to Oxygen magazine. And those old school girls like Monica Brand and Jenny Hendershot, those were the ones whose bodies I was like, that's it. That is the epitome of a female physique to me. So, when I was growing up, I was active in all sports. Like I did all the school sports. I did gymnastics. I was at the age of 11, I started pursuing martial arts. So I have a black belt in Taekwondo. Started that when I was 11. I did that until I was 17. Took a little break, then went back. I taught for a long time with martial arts. Then in high school, I started competitive cheerleading as well. Loved competitive cheer. And I'm kind of one of those people who, like, when I pursue something, I go all in. So, martial arts was like an obsession of mine. We went to tournaments every weekend. We came up to Minnesota all the time for the Diamond Nationals. And, I'm just by nature definitely a competitive person. So tournaments every weekend, always pursuing that next belt level, which is kind of similar. You draw similarities to bodybuilding where you always know you need to improve. You're always shooting for that next thing, the discipline that it takes, the dedication that it takes. So, then with cheerleading, did 4 years of cheerleading at my high school level. Once I was done, I actually coached competitive cheerleading at an all-star level for 5 or 6 years. Did that. And I always needed something that had some type of competitive outlet to it. So, while I was doing that, I would always go to the gym. I was a lifter, nothing crazy at that time. But I did have a friend say to me once, like, He had a bench in his bedroom, and he's like, "This is something you could really be good at, you know." Like he, I don't know, maybe did 10 pounds a side or something. Who knows what it was back then? I think I was probably 17 or whatever. I had another friend who started taking me to the gym a little more frequently, and then um, once I met my husband, I actually got him to teach me how to rack pull. There was some local deadlift competitions, so signed up for those, did very well in those. I think I always knew that I would compete, but with bodybuilding, I also understood that it was going to have to be all or nothing. Like, I wasn't going to just half it. I wasn't just going to do it on a part-time basis where I worked part-time. I never felt like I was in the right time of my life to give it everything. Then I had my son when I was 26. So, sometime around 22, that's when I was pulling heavy deadlifts. That's when I was benching really heavy. I was taking the gym a lot more seriously. Then had my son at 26. Took a couple years off of lifting while he was a toddler. Kind of hard as a new mom. Once he was a little bit older and got into school, then I started going back to the gym a lot more full time. Then the first year that I competed, I was 33. So I took some time to grow, like I wasn't young. And I think that's where some of these young girls coming up, like, don't rush, like the stage is going to be there. They're always in such a hurry, but they don't have the muscle tissue yet. Like, you don't have the muscle maturity. Some girls are fortunate and they do because of the sports background. And I'm fortunate. I mean, a lot of the tissue that I have, I know came from those sports that I did when I was younger. But, getting those oxygen magazines and knowing that that was where I kind of wanted to end up, that was the ideal physique to me. So hired a local guy who was a bodybuilder, and that was kind of the first thing he said to me was, your back and your shoulders have to come up a little bit. So he encouraged me to do, he said, every second day that you're in the gym, I want you to do pull-ups, like just slam them out hard. And then 2 a week shoulders. Um, so yeah, I got ready for my first show. I did a 16-week prep. I got second place to a female who had already won a regional show in Canada. So, she was kind of a veteran competitor. So I really wanted that win because like I said, I'm super competitive. But once I stepped on that stage, like I knew it was for me. Um, one of the judges came up to me after and he was like, he actually handed his phone or his camera to my husband and he said, she's going to be a superstar. So take a picture of me and her. And I'll tell you right now, she's going to be, up there if you continue to pursue this, which was very flattering. It was about 10 minutes after getting off stage for the first show. And it was like, oh, that adrenaline rush of the competitiveness and the stage, like to me, it combines the aspect of the martial arts with the hard part, the discipline. But with cheerleading, it was always the presentation and the energy and the performance piece. So I get the best of both worlds with bodybuilding, right? Like I get to go on stage and perform and flex and kind of show off because that's how I am. But you get the discipline throughout, the competitive throughout the season, and then going into the weight room and the food and everything else. So yeah, that sort of summarizes it anyway, all the way up to the first show.
Did you have any, reservations about the sport before you got into it? Because unfortunately, even as much as as much as there's information about bodybuilding out there now, I mean, there's still so many people that have these myths about the sport. Was there anything that you were concerned about getting into the sport, or did you just want to just jump right in?
Not really. My husband had done a show as well, like before that I met him. So, and we had a few friends that had done them. There was a local girl here who had done a few shows as well. She made it to like the national level and she was quite good. So I always looked to her for, inspiration and her trajectory. So not really. I'm not one of those people who overthinks something. Like I was gonna go all in, and then if it wasn't for me and I got to a certain level where I was over it, I would walk away. But after my first show, using that local coach, I had another guy who now is a judge, and he had coached and he had run our local shows. He was the promoter, and he said, like Lisa, if you're serious about going to the next level, I can hook you up with a coach. His name is Micah Sidhu. He was actually a Canadian bodybuilding pro. At the time, he was living somewhere in South Africa once I actually got hooked up with him. He was over there because he had health issues with his lungs, so it was a better climate for him. But I will tell you right now, Meeting him and working with him in that second season was life changing. He was really about like champion mindset. He would take some time every Sunday. We would spend nearly an hour on the phone talking about what it took to build that muscle tissue. Like he had a really interesting way of approaching the diet for me. I ate a lot of steak that year, a lot of flank steak, a lot of fats. Yeah. And he was really about taking my physique and my mind to the next level.
Yeah. And I mean, we talked about this right before we started recording because it's a myth that's still out there. And I mean, like you said, you just did an interview for your local TV about, all, and it's so out there and it's so prevalent even to this day, but it has gotten better, I think, like the last 5 years. But there are still so many women that have that fear that if they even look at a dumbbell in the gym, they're just going to bulk up and, gain like 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And I always say to that, I have my entire life savings in the bank. I will spend that just to train with you then for one session then because you have found the secret that everybody is looking for. But did you ever have that fear? And even if you didn't have that fear, I mean, like we talked about before, you still hear that all the time today. How do you like to respond to that when you hear that?
Yeah. I mean, I always say to girls, like, for example, so in 2019 on stage, very fairly lean, I weighed about 125 pounds. I'm not big. I'm only about 5 feet tall. In the 2 years that I took recently off, right, just to get ready and build a little tissue for the pro stage, I am weighing in this week leaner than I was, but I'm at about 128 pounds. So in 2 years, 3 pounds of muscle tissue. And I lift like a maniac. So, and I lift heavy and I, really pursue the hypertrophy. So for females, like we do not have what it takes genetically, especially naturally, to put tissue on easily. So I'll always say that to girls. Like you see these girls that are pushing heavy weight, and it always makes me proud when I walk into the gym and I see a girl busting her butt because I'm like, yes, that's going to get you the physique you want, not the cardio bunnies and everything else. So I'm the first one to try to break that down for girls. Like they see me lifting. Do I look manly? Like in pictures, it looks like I have a lot of tissue. I'm not overly big. I don't think there's any one body part for me that's specifically overly developed. Um, but these girls that I really do try to break it down for them. Like if you lift moderately to heavy, you're going to get the physique you want. You're still going to look really feminine and you're going to have along with it the benefits that go with weightlifting, staving off osteoporosis and, just being stronger and healthier in the long run, having some actual performance strength. So, and, and along with that, I always say to girls, like, find a form of lifting that you enjoy. If that means that you love strong women competitive games, great. If you love powerlifting, if you like CrossFit, if you like bodybuilding style workouts, do the ones that sort of you connect to, right? Because that's when you're going to put your all into it.
Absolutely. I mean, I have friends that do yoga and they're in better shape than some of my friends that, work out and stuff like it. Yeah, it's all about finding what's interesting in you
Find
because, yeah.
exactly, find that physical activity that you wake up in the morning and you get excited for.
Yeah. Because so many people, yeah, they just think after that first workout, and that's the other thing too, is that like they get so sore after that first workout, and then they're just like, oh, I'm done. We're just like, it's just like anything else in life. It takes time. And unfortunately, in my generation, I'm 27, in my generation where, everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday. This is not the sport to get into if you really want to do that. But we got to talk shoulders now because everyone, I'll have a photo on her Instagram pop up right now as I'm talking about this because like her shoulders are absolutely ridiculous. And I even told her like before we started the podcast, I was like, we're going to have to talk about this because it's just something out there where like, I'm gonna get so much hate mail if like I don't ask her about this because everyone's like, especially women, that's their biggest number one body part where they're just like, I need to work on my shoulder. So, what does a shoulder day look like for you? Because like I was even concerned, I'm not gonna lie, that like you might not be able to fit in the camera screen when we had it because like I had Andrea Shaw on and that was a struggle in and of itself. But for you, I was like, with your shoulders, I was like, that this might be a challenge.
And it's funny because I look at myself and I don't think my shoulders are my strong suit. Like my arms, I always get a lot of comments about my arms because my bis and tris are quite big. I used to love to train triceps when I first started training. I don't really touch arms at all anymore because they're a little too big. But shoulders, yeah. So I definitely, once I got into bodybuilding, I knew I had to grow them. I knew that there had to be some development there. So initially, I would do one heavy day a week. So lots of pressing, lots of heavy laterals, lots of heavy rear delt exercises like rear delt flies. Then when I was working with Mike, who I mentioned, we did a lot of upright rows for the lateral delta as well. And then, so on top of having a heavy shoulder day, I would also do later in the week a more high rep shoulder day. So because the shoulder is such a small muscle group, I feel like it needs to be hit with both high rep stuff with a little bit of a lighter weight, and then a heavy day where the reps are a little bit lower. I just found that that was how I connected to mine was I could do the heavy stuff later in the week, then get a really good pump and some blood in them. And that's just how I've always sort of approached my shoulder days. Um, I think you have to equally work all heads as well. I have a pretty good bench too. So, when you bench and when you do some incline pressing, the front delts are going to come along as well. So, in the last 3 years, my incline bench has really incline dumbbells, not incline barbell. So, if you really want your front delts to come up, I would also say include some incline bar dumbbell stuff. Really, really focus on that, and then heavy pressing with just progressive overload, true progressive overload. So if you're working in the 10 to 12 range and you're pressing the 40s, in the next couple weeks, you better be picking up the 45s, you better be picking up the 50s. And even if you're only getting 2 or 3 reps, pick them up, feel them out. As soon as I added wrist wraps as well for any kind of pressing, it helps stabilize the wrist a little, make you feel a little more secure. A lot of my pressing went up. So that's another little tip that I always try to pass on to girls. Because a lot of female, like I had strong wrists from martial arts. So always being in that fist. And then same thing with cheerleading, gripping the foot. So I always had so it was never an issue for me, but a lot of females get into lifting and they find their wrists and their grip strength is terrible. So I always say, like, do your first few warm up sets, then throw wrist straps on. Like, you still want that strength in your forearm and your wrist to come along. So you don't want to wrap from the first set, but once you get some good wrist wraps, throw them on for your top sets.
Yep, absolutely. And that reminded me, I had a pro strong woman on, and she just like went like this on the camera, like she like put it on. Her forearms were like as big as most people's arms that I have on the thing. So yeah, it's all about also the way that you work out as well. But the gym bro in me, when you said that you don't train arms anymore, is that a struggle for you? Because the gym bro in me is just like, oh my god, no arm days.
I probably throw them in there like once every 2 weeks just because I like
Yeah.
to. So yes, it is. Sometimes I'm like, oh, you know what? I just got to have a little arm pump. So yes, every once in a while, touch them up. I just like to see the tricep flex a little bit. So yeah.
What is one body part that no matter how hard you train it, it just seems to be the most, the hardest muscle to really get to catch up? Because for me, I mean, I'm 6'3", so my legs are that one area, my whole legs basically. I mean, my
Uh,
calves, don't even get me started. I could inject pure muscle into my legs or calves and they don't even gain an ounce of muscle. I mean, it's a never ending quest of failure for me. But what's that one body part for you that, like, no matter how hard you train it, it just
so finally this year, my back I've really, really started to make a better connection with my, mind muscle connection with my back. So it took me a while. I actually had a little bit of a frozen shoulder. So I recently started working with an osteopath, and I have to thank him because he's like a wizard. He's untwisted my body. I had ACL repair on my knee many years ago. I blew my knee during cheerleading. And unfortunately, I would think I was 20, 21. I didn't really do the physio the way I should have. So, it kind of laxed, and then everything sort of got twisted on the left side. So I'm going to, thank him for untwisting my body. And now I can actually feel a connection with my lat on my left side. So, and for a lot of years, I would start with lat pull downs, just like any bro workout. Hit the lat pull downs first. This year, I started with rowing and I did 3 or 4 exercises of rowing only. Then I would put the pull downs. I feel like that has really made a difference. Sometimes I felt like the pull down would destabilize my shoulder so much that when I got to rowing, I couldn't connect with my back at all. So sometimes just changing up the order of the exercises that you have can help ignite something in the body where it's like, oh, I haven't felt that before. So for me, it was just reprioritizing what exercises I put in what order. And that's made a little bit of more of a difference. I think in order for me to really truly stand on the pro stage, my back is going to have to come up a little bit more. So, yeah, that's kind of back for me. Like My back wasn't terrible. I knew that it needed to be better. And so now that I've tapped into a couple different approaches, I think it's coming along. Yeah,
Which, I mean, for me, that is my one body part that, I could not train for 10 years and be like 350 pounds in my front, and my back for some reason would still be, there'd still be a semblance of muscle there. So that's, I think that's just from, I worked in a lot of warehouses in like college and, lifting and loading boxes into trucks. And also, I'm a huge kayaker when it comes to, lake season. So I mean, I tell anyone that's looking for a back workout, I mean, you go and kayak for like an hour or so, your back is going to be dead, in the water. So there's little things like that too. But I mean, there's so much more to the sport than just, like, oh, I talk to a lot of people and I say, like, oh, I have a lot of bodybuilders on the podcast, and they go, oh, those are the people who just work out a lot and they go on stage and they pose. And I was like, you got about 1% of the lifestyle down. You got a few of the basic, but the number one thing that I think, it's talked about a little bit, but it's not talked about as much as it should, is the nutrition. Because I still have friends who, God bless them, to this day, they think that they can go eat Burger King, like 2 or 3 times a week and still stay in shape. And it's like, well, yeah, because you're 27. Call me in 5 years and tell me how that's working out for you. But what were some of the
exactly.
bigger nutritional changes that you made when you had to, really take things seriously in the sport? Because like you said, you gained 3 pounds of muscle in 2 years, and you can eat, all you want. And sometimes, even that is just a struggle just to even put on that size.
Yeah, so I think I have the body type. Like I'm a little bit easier than most females to put tissue on, but I also am quick to store fat. Just genetically, I'm one of those who, if I overdo it, I definitely pack on the pounds. Like even right now, being 7 days out of my pro debut, I'm waiting for my glutes, this last little tiny bit to come off. And that's just how I'm built. Which is, I'm never gonna. There's nothing you can do about that. That's just the card I was dealt. So you got to work a little harder and bust your butt for it. But yeah, nutrition wise, I mean, I think from a pretty young age, like when I first started touching those weights, I knew that I had intake a lot more protein. So I've always added the protein powders. I do really like fish. So, when you started adding fish in, I'd have tuna here and there, the chicken breasts, like the food. But I also love, like, I'm a little older than you, but in my childhood, like we ate a lot of sugary snacks. Like I love sugary cereal. Like,
Yes.
that's what I cannot wait to bust open a box of Cinnamon Toast Crunch after this show, right? Um, and then, like, we grew up on Fruit Roll-Ups, and we grew up on Dunkaroos, and
Oh
we grew
god.
right? So, I think there's a certain comfort that I take from, like, sugary foods. So, to stay away from those and make sure that I only intake those in moderation, my mom, I grew up on a lot, like my mom made a lot of really great stews. I ate a lot of rice and potatoes and meat because that's the kind of guy my dad was as well. Like he loved meat and potatoes. So I was fortunate that I grew up on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think I ate cereal, for breakfast my entire life. And that still is one of my vices for sure, you know?
Yep, you're going to be around my 500th podcast guest, and this is the first time that I've ever brought up the childhood trifecta, which is fruit by the foot, fruit roll-ups, and gushers. You're talking the holy
Gotcha.
trifecta. You're talking the holy trifecta right there. Yeah.
Yep. And that's the thing. So, and there's something to be said for food that you associate with comfort from when you were a child. Um, so, I think that's the hardest part is like when you talk about nutrition for me, it's eating those things in moderation and not going overboard. Have I struggled with it in the past? Absolutely. So, just being aware of it and knowing that I'm going to benefit that much more from eating those whole foods. And I take on clients, so I live it, I know it, I program it for other people, but applying it sometimes isn't as easy, right?
Oh, it's easy to not practice what you preach. I mean, I've learned that just from being in, a corporate world and stuff like that. But yeah, I totally understand that. And I mean, the number one struggle that I would have never guessed a million years before I started this podcast. I know a little bit because I had a background where I was almost dabbled in bodybuilding, but for so many of these guests, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than your nutrition. It's harder than your working out. Would have never guessed it in a million years, but I compare it now to being a perfect driver, where you can be a great driver, you can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser, you can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your journey and experience with posing been like?
So I coach posing. I have a little posing studio in my basement. So with the martial arts background, especially with the lines in the forms that we do with martial arts, some of the shapes that we create with our hands, and then with cheerleading as well, like I coach the dance portion of it. I always did choreography. Posing is hard, and I always tell people that. Posing is difficult. But when you look at the body on stage, are you creating shapes that complement you? And that's what we need to understand about posing the most. Is it's gonna vary. Like you see girls hit a side tricep 5 different ways. 5 girls standing on stage beside each other, and it's never gonna look identical because you need to pose for your body. I'm pretty short. I need to stand up tall. If I squat and sit on my leg, I look like a little person. I do. And so whereas but even you look at the current Miss Olympia champion for women's physique, she's tall, but she still stands up very tall in her side tricep. It suits her body. She poses with such grace. I mean, and you look at the figure competitor, Sid Gillian, like she's a 5-time champion for a reason. She is as elegant and poised as they come. And I've always been told by the judge, like my very first show, I was given best poser. I was given the Status Fitness Magazine Most Marketable Award at my second show. Um, I love being on stage. I feel like I bring a certain stage presence that you can't teach. And that's not being cocky or conceited. Because I love being on stage. I know for some women they don't. That's a part that they really have to work at because it's completely out of their comfort zone. So with me, I mean, I'll own that every time. Like I love it. So when I'm helping other girls, it's always the cue, like relax, because the judges know when you're not feeling it. They're going to see it. They're going to see it in your face. They're going to see it in the way you're breathing. They're going to see it in the way you're holding your neck. So walk out there and like I've had one girl, she's also competing at the amateur portion of the Canadian Nationals that are coming up next weekend. We've been posing since she was like 20 weeks out. She put the time in because she knew she wanted to nail it. She knew that when she stepped on stage, she didn't want to have to think. She just wanted her body to do. And that's, I think, the best piece of advice I can give is start early. Hire a posing coach if you need to, but also get used to seeing your body in the mirror because you're going to know what looks right and looks wrong. Like, oh, that looks kind of weird. But if you completely avoid it altogether and you don't stand in front of the mirror, you're being a detriment to yourself, right? So before girls even come to me for posing, I say like look up videos, find girls that have similar physiques to you. So find a girl that's as tall as you are, find a girl that has arms that are shaped like yours or legs that are shaped like yours, and see what you like about her posing. See what you like about her physique. Because then you can kind of emulate and model yourself after that. So it's always good to do your research as well with posing, right? Like watch posing routines, find which ones you are spark you. So
You just answered my next question because I always find it so fascinating that everyone's posing routine has to be a little bit different because like yeah, if you were to copy the Miss Olympia's posing routine, it's going to be different than your body's just going to be looking different. So yeah, it's all about just figuring that out. But out of your physique poses, what is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
ooh, I hate a back double bicep
Yeah.
because you can't see it. Like you can stack a mirror behind you, but even still, like when I hit it in a mirror, it's that one that I can't self check all the time. So it's definitely one that I dislike the most. Um, I either like I really do like my side tricep because my triceps are so strong. And a side chest is a pretty good one for me too.
Well, at least with the back pose, you don't have to have your smile on 24/7 though. That's the one where you can, because most people do not understand for these shows, your smile is one of the most things that gets the most sore. Your jaw is one of the things that gets the most sore because you have to smile the whole darn time that you're up there. So yeah, at
You're
least
trying to
there's that.
breathe and smile
Yeah.
and control your tummy and flex. Yes, exactly.
How long was it before you really developed sort of that muscle control that you need for posing? Because if you were to take someone from the general public on, they'd be able to do it for what, maybe like 5 seconds, but they're having you at stage for like minutes upon minutes at a time. And you really, like you said, like people don't understand, like if you're doing like a front double by, you have to have every body part really like flexed. You're even flexing your legs, you're flexing your stomach.
I think that's the one thing that like people who have never done it before and then are the social media trolls, and they complain, "Oh, he looked his this pose didn't look good on this guy, and this pose didn't. He looked like on stage that weekend." You try it because yeah, you're gonna get winded in 2.2 seconds because it takes so much practice. Even still this week, like leading up, I'm doing as much posing as I can so that when I nail it, I know I'm nailing it. And still, I'll walk off that stage and I'll nearly pass out because you are giving it and squeezing and holding your stomach and trying to smile, and you're not doing it on a lot of food, especially this week and peak week. You're just giving it everything. So it takes so much time and patience.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, even in your off season, if you did, you'd have difficulties. But so I'm amazed because normally when I have guests on, they're like less than a week out, their brain's a little foggy, they're having trouble sometimes with answers. You seem to be very coherent and have it all together. Do you find that you don't maybe suffer from much as like the prep brain struggles that I hear all the time as everyone else, or?
No, you know what? I just, because I had that a meal just before we talked.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this morning I nearly thought cardio was going to kill me. I was hard just to put one foot in front of the other today. What I try to do leading up on peak week is if I need a rest, I sit down and rest. Then I take it slow. And then another little burst of energy will always come. So what you do is you kind of just need to be ready. And then I'll use that little burst of energy to get organized. And then I'll attack the next thing. And if I'm then once I'm tired, I just rest and I just take the time. You can't force it. Like, do I struggle? Yeah, I'm struggling this week hard, 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 hard. This is the leanest I've ever been. This is the most I've ever had to suffer through a prep. And we use the word suffering, like it's like we're going to war, and we're not. It's self-inflicted, so we never want anybody to feel sorry for ourselves, or we don't want other people to feel sorry for us. But this one's been a tough one for sure. And unfortunately, um, my husband and I co-parent, and he's been out of town, so it's been me this month. So getting my son to wrestling and everything else, and making lunches and getting him to school has just been falling on me. But with that being said as well, like I am very fortunate. My parents help out. My father-in-law helps out. I am very, very, very lucky that I have the family that supports me. And then I get through days like this where my mom sends me a little text and she's like, I'm getting really excited for you. So as much as it is an individual sport, I have a huge help. I am very, very, very lucky.
Well, speaking of that, what was your friends and family's reaction like when you first announced to them, "Hey, I want to give bodybuilding a try"?
Yeah. I think they came to the show not knowing what it was even going to be. And then afterward it was like, you killed that. Like, so I think with the background of martial arts and cheerleading, I think, and anybody who knew me knew that I was one of those people like, oh, I'm going to give it my everything. So I don't think it was out of the realm, where it was like, oh my God, what are you doing? But I think once I started to pursue it more heavily, there was definitely a learning curve for my parents. They've always been people who have supported me no matter what, though. Like, are you sure this is really for you? Nah, never. They've always been, kill it. Like, we'll be here. So I'm lucky that way. So I mean, my son, he's 12 and he's very supportive as well. Like, mom, you're gonna win, you're gonna kill it. I remember I had to pull out of a show a couple years ago, and he was upset for me. He was, and so to know that he had that buy-in was pretty special too. But no, I don't think anybody that I know has ever really approached it and been surprised that it's something that I do.
And we'll just wait until your son gets like 16, 17, and then all his friends are gonna be like, "Dude, your mom's jacked. Does she have like a weight? Does she have like a program for me or something like that, or something like that?" That's what it always happens. So just enjoy the younger years while you still can.
There's a couple kids on our block who, yeah, but they're the same. They come by, your mom's jacked, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we get that, but yeah, I mean, I take it. And that's like I try to not flaunt it, around the block where all the friends are hanging out and everything. I stay covered, and on Instagram, I try to keep it very tasteful. I'm definitely not one of those who over sexualizes this. It's not something that I want to do because I do have a young son, and that's important to me. That's not who I am. I never really want that aspect of it to creep in for me for Instagram, and that is something that I'll kind of always stick to. So
Well, and on top of that too, like you were just talking about, I mean, you're not the average looking woman, and even if you are walked out dressed the way you are right now, I mean, it's hard to kind of hide, some of your muscular development. So, what is that like? Because I mean, you do draw people's attention more often, and I mean, it's just because it's human nature when they see something that's not of the normal, and then they're just like, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." What has that been like, sort of adjusting to that fact? Where I mean, like, you're not going to be as anonymous as before.
you know what? I think most people look. I remember we were on a cruise. We were on a family cruise, and it was one of the first times that a girl, she was probably 15, 16, like elbowed her dad and was like pointing at me. And that was kind of the first, and at that time I was kind of lean, so I had some shoulder veins happening. And um, that was the first time that I felt like I was kind of looked at like that. And I didn't love it. Um, like I'm especially one of those people who I don't judge. If you want to be, if you want to eat ice cream every day and you don't care about your health, that's on you. Like I'm not one to judge people if you want to drink and smoke and all these other things. And I keep my opinions to myself. So, for somebody to point and stare was a little bit much. Um, but it's human nature, like you said. So I mean, I've been out and about at a mall and I have a tank top on and a girl's like, "Oh my God, I love your arms." And I'm like, "Thanks." You take it in stride and you say thank you. Thunder Bay where I live is very small, so the gym goers that I do know, like I had a guy say to me the other day, like, "You're gonna kill it, Lisa. You look great." For the most part, a lot of people are very supportive and they see me in the gym all the time. So, but yeah, I mean, anytime that you're out and about and I'm in, clothing that's a little bit smaller, I think people point and stare, but I'm also one of those people who like I don't do it for that reason. I don't
Well,
do it.
luckily you are in Canada, so if they do have anything bad to say, it's going to be in the most like passive aggressive way possible.
It'll be sweet. It's usually very kind. It is.
It's always
But
the oh you look great, but I would never want to do that. That's the one that we hear all the time here.
and then to that you reply, you probably won't.
And then I reply to them too. And if you do, then give me your phone number. Yeah.
Exactly. I'll help you. I'll
Yeah,
train you.
yeah,
Compose it.
absolutely. And I mean, now we go to probably the highlight for a lot of the bodybuilders that have ever competed in their journey. What was that moment like when they announced your name and you realized, oh my god, I'm a pro now?
So that year, I came out of a prep. I was going to do the Arnold Amateurs, and my body just wasn't going. It was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. So I came out of that prep pretty heartbroken. And then I'm actually friends with Neil Hill, and he said to me, "I don't think you're going to be ready for the Arnolds, but stay in prep, do Toronto, and you'll win." So I came out of prep for probably about a week or so, or two. And I had some other things going on in my life at the time. Like I had changed jobs and was dealing with some family stuff. And I said to my coach, like, "Do you think that we can make a go at Canadian Nationals?" So I was talking to another girlfriend of mine who's a figure competitor. And she's like, "Lisa, let's just book a hotel. And even if you don't compete, just come." So we booked a hotel, but we also had a family vacation that was the same cruise. We had that booked. So I started prepping for about a week. Then we went out of town on a cruise for 10 days. So I tried to eat as good as I could. Like I stayed pretty good on the cruise. Like it was great because even my son said to me, "Mom, they have fish at this buffet. Like they have all the bodybuilding food you need." Like I could get egg white omelets in the morning if I wanted to. Because there's so many people with dietary restrictions now, the cruise has to have pretty clean food available. So I stayed on diet the best I could. I had cheesecake in New York. I had a couple nights where I had a few treats on the cruise. Then when I got back, I actually only had 9.5 weeks. Standing on that stage when they called my, and now what you also have to understand is in 2018, I won my division, but didn't win the overall. So narrowly missing my pro card in 2018 was like burned into my brain. Burned. That gut feeling of not getting the call out in 2018, I didn't want to repeat that. So in 2019, when I was training and when I was doing cardio, it was don't let that happen again. I don't want that same feeling of not getting heard hearing my name. So the push, the drive, and then in 2019 when they did announce my name, and the girl, my friend who's a fitness competitor, her name is Amy. Um, she ran out on stage. She was side stage when they announced my name, and she had a mouthful of Twix. And she comes charging onto the stage and give me this big hug. And my other great friend Emily was there, and I called my parents, and I think it was probably the most elated I've ever heard my dad. He's a, pretty quiet and disciplined guy. So my mom was beating herself up because she didn't come and she'd always come to all my shows. So, there was a great feeling of relief but it wasn't something that I always wanted when I first started bodybuilding. Like I just wanted to pursue it to do it. But then once you get deeper into it, right, that's where you want to end up. So to achieve that was pretty great, and I'm the only pro in Thunder Bay. We had one back in the day. She has since moved to the states. I think back in the '90s she was a pro, so I am the only one right now, which is kind of a nice title to have as well. But yeah,
That's amazing because yeah, that for so many of the bodybuilders I have on, even if they win other big shows as a pro, I mean, just getting that pro card, that is your ticket to the to the big seat or the little seat at the big table, and hey, it's your whole way in. But I mean, this sport is so much more of a mental journey than it is really a physical journey. And most people don't understand that because they just notice the physical changes that happen. But what has this whole lifestyle change been like for you mentally? Because I just cannot imagine that mental strength that has been added.
yeah. I mean, I think explaining that to people is. I was actually talking to a local guy who's done a few shows, and I said to him, like I'm just ready to be there. I said I've basically been prepping for a year because of all the postponements with the pandemic. I've been in and out of prep. And he goes, Lisa, just the mental state that you've been in. He goes, I've seen you pushing this whole time. He goes, you must be exhausted. And mentally, I'm just exhausted. And physically, I'm tired. I'm ready to go to dinner with my son and take him out for a burger and go to a movie theater and have a bag of popcorn with him, do the normal day things a little bit. And I know there's some female bodybuilders, they live it 24/7. I think it's a little different when you have children, the normalcy pieces. So, with Christmas coming up, which will be nice, I have a few parties and things planned, just to go back to normal. I'm good friends with Patricia Goslin, and I know after shows, like, she takes like a month off training. And I don't know that I'll take an extended period off training, but I might take a week or two. I think my brain really needs it. I love to train, do not get me wrong. But in the last month or so, I've found it tough to dial right in. So that mental aspect, like I love to train and I still want to be in love with training. So I want to find that again. I want to take the necessary mental break that I need so that I'm still in love with it. I want to uncover again why I'm doing this so that I can do it for a long term, the longevity piece, right? So, yeah, I mean, being in a constant calorie deficit is hard. I go to work and, like you said, like, brain fog is real in this last little bit. And there's some days at work, like, I do mortgages and loans for a living. And so sometimes I need my brain to really actually be working. And there was a couple times this week, like one of my coworkers came in and I'm trying to focus on what she's saying to me. And I had nothing, like I just had to say, like, you're gonna have to give me 5 minutes. I gotta get some water and a meal into me, and then I'll be able to listen to what you're saying because it's very hard. And then I need to sometimes I get home from the gym and I'm hungry and I know I'm gonna walk in the door and my son's gonna, want to talk about his day. And I want to give him my undivided attention, but I'm hungry. So I need to like sit and remind myself, like, he's not choosing this for me. I am. So take a breath, be ready, for whatever he comes at you with. So, like, and be ready to tidy up the house and do these things. And so, you got to take the edge off because the people in your life aren't choosing it. You are. So sometimes that's the hardest mental piece. The meals I can do, but yeah, I'm one of those people who kind of needs little refeeds to keep the mental sanity. I need, I go a week hard. An approach that always worked for me was like 6 low days and then a nice little bump up so that I could get just a little mental break. Nothing crazy, but just some carbs, and then right back hard again for 6 days or whatever was required. So that approach has always worked because then I get that little tiny mental break that I do require.
Which, yeah, that is great. And now we get to the $1 million question. If you could change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding, if someone walked up to you and said, Lisa, you can change one thing about this sport and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
For me, coming with the background of cheerleading, I would like to see score sheets that are more structured. I would like to see score sheets where, if there's 5 things they want to see in women's physique, that we're given a score on each one of those, then it's broken down into a total score. So we know how we stacked up against that competitor that stood beside us. Okay, well, Lisa was a little less muscular, or Lisa was a little less conditioned, but her overall score added up a little. Do you know what I mean? Like, on in the world of cheerleading, we have pretty detailed score sheets, so you always knew, like, okay, we beat that team in stunting skills or we beat that team in tumbling skills. It'd be nice to have more than just a single digit score.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I've that's similar along the lines of what I've heard from other people too. And I, couldn't agree more. And when we do talk to you a year from today, because I will have you on a year from now because you were a great guest to talk to, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding journey? Where would you like to be at just in your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved when we have you on a year from today?
I mean, everybody always the epitome of our sport is the Olympia. So I would love to be qualified for the Olympia. Um, with this pro debut coming up in a few days, um, I'm fortunate that Ivy Ryan is actually coming. Yeah. So, and she's somebody who I've looked to because she has a family. She's a few years older than me, and she still does this at the upper echelon. So for me, it's going to be nice to see how I stand beside her, and then I'll make an approach from there. I'm really not going to set too many goals just yet until after this pro show so that I know where I stack up. Like what's the judge's feedback? Hey, Lisa, your back needs to be this much better, or your this needs to be better, or you need to come in more conditioned, or whatever. So that judge's feedback is really going to sort of set the game plan for the next year. I'm working with Shelby Starnes. I would like to continue to work with him. He's been a great coach. Um, and then, personally, I want my legs to come up a little bit. I would like my back to come up a little bit. So those are things that I think I need to work on. And I would like my body fat to stay in a little bit more of a reasonable level. COVID was obviously very hard on a lot of people. So, we all got into those little funks. So I just want to make sure that I'm being true to me and that I'm enjoying this sport for what it is. That I'm enjoying my son, that I'm enjoying my family, and those kind of things.
Oh, absolutely. And lastly, what piece of advice would you give for someone who might, walk up to you and say, "Hey, I just want to start getting in shape and start working out," because I mean, so many people just don't understand that taking that first step in the gym is the hardest and it becomes so much easier after that. But I mean, and also everyone's body's built differently too. So you can't just give them like specific advice, which is one thing that I think sucks about the lifestyle in general is that like you can't, there's not one cookie cutter program that's going to work for everybody. But what piece of a general advice would you give for someone who just wants to just get started, working out?
So I think there's two things. I think if you're going to choose the gym, people always say to me, well, I'm worried about what people are going to think of me. Guess what?
Nobody
You lock into
cares.
that. No one cares. They're more worried about themselves than they are about you. So put that worry aside. So that's number one. Worry two, or number two is, like I said earlier, find a type of lifting or a type of exercise that you truly enjoy. Something when you wake up in the morning, you're like, I can't wait to go to Zumba class. I can't wait to go to yoga class. I can't wait to go to my CrossFit gym. I can't wait. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm ready to learn, how to clean and jerk today or whatever. So, really, find whatever exercise form you love. And it might take you trying out a couple things, and that's okay. If it's cheerleading, if it's martial arts, if it's boxing, like whatever you want it to be, but find it and then develop it from there. Because if you're forcing it and you don't like it, if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to continue to do it. So find a form that you really, really like.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, everyone, we cannot thank Lisa enough for, coming on and sharing her story, especially being this close to her show. I mean, how we got through this, she did an amazing for someone who's at the stage of her prep that she's at. But again, everyone go and give her a follow on her Instagram page. I'll leave a link below. And, everyone buyer beware. You will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating all those Twinkies and, get a little bit more in shape. But again, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Ryan, you know what? Thanks for, pursuing me the way you did. Sometimes we're a little hesitant, like you said, being this close to the show, energy's a little low, but you know what? It was my pleasure. It was really great. You're a great host. So thank you. And thank you for being, no, but thank you for being an advocate for female bodybuilders because there's not a lot out there. And it's always nice to hear different females' journeys and where they've come from too. So
100%. Yeah. And I appreciate that too. And yeah, I mean, yeah, it's just, as you can tell, I can talk a mile a minute. So, you can put anyone on this damn podcast and, I'll spend 10 hours, sharing stories with them. But yeah, again, everyone, like I said, go give Lisa a follow. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot signing off. Have a great day, everyone.
thanks.